Do you know how if you're awake at 1 o'clock in the morning?
No, I don't, because I'm sleeping at 1 o'clock in the morning, so I don't know what you're talking about.
That's fair. I'm a night owl. I love it when I'm like editing or doing something and I send it to you at like 11 and you say, Sarah, you should be in bed. And I'm going, it's only 11 o'clock. Are you kidding me?
What are you doing?
I was up late last night because I was trying to get this scene rewritten. And my brain starts going, you need to do social media better. What can you do better on your social media? So guess who was up until 2 a.m. with random thoughts running through her head?
At least I hope you have like a little notebook next to your bed, so at least you can write down all the ideas that you get at 1 in the morning while you're awake. You might as well use it.
I have notebooks everywhere.
There you go. Well, you know what I have is a look at these lovely earrings that I have.
Oh my goodness, read.
I know, right? It says a read in different
So
colors.
is one of them read and one of them's red?
Good one. It's a funny bunny for someone who was awake at 1 o'clock in the morning.
It's gonna be trouble today. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Alrighty, what are you drinking today?
Today I went back to an old favorite, apple cider. So warm.
So warm. I've never drank apple cider warm before, though. Unless, is it a juice? Or is it just like apple cider with water that you drink?
This one is a mix that just makes it kind of taste like apple cider. When you make real apple cider, you boil the apples to make anything like applesauce, anything like that. The water gets infused with the juice of the apples, super thick and a little bit caramelized because it's been boiling in that water. Then you add spices to it and make it into a nummy.
Okay, that actually sounds yummy. That sounds yummy. Alrighty, well, I have my trusted friend, my rooibos tea over here. Yum, never disappointed. Let's get you into this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tea and Tales. I'm Madeleine Eindel.
And I'm Sarah Sampson. Thank you for tuning in. Especially thank you to Amy from Booked and Reviewed by Amy and Note Trail. Today's episode is an author spotlight.
So please welcome Tracy Smith Mathis.
Hello, Tracy. It's so great to have you on with us today.
Hey, it's so great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You write memoirs, and that is a completely new animal. So I really love that we're going to get the chance to talk about writing memoirs. You are also traditionally published, correct?
That's right. Yep. McFarland Publishing Company right here in North Carolina. And I actually got to see the first books being printed. I printed them myself because they do their own printing. And so I met with the founder of the company who still works there in his blue jeans and t-shirts every day with his son, and saw the mountain property, which was gorgeous, and saw their building. I think part of getting the traditional publishing, that route was not really something I had ever dreamed about until I met Sarah and did those classes. I was on the path to self-publication the whole time because, everything I've read, like nobody can get published anymore unless you're already a name and you have a big platform. I have like 500 people on my email list. I didn't think it was possible, but they being my beta readers and friends that I made in that group, they really encouraged me to try.
I remember when you got that email from the publisher that said, we want a contract, and you just were so on cloud nine, like, is this real? Am I being punked right now? Is this fake?
I really didn't believe it was true. And you have to research because there's a lot of publishing companies out there that will tell you that, and they're vanity, or they're scammers or whatever.
I saw you peek your book up a little bit. Can we see your book?
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about this book that came out last year.
It's called Pennies from Vietnam, A Sister at Home, A Brother at War. This is my brother Larry, and I'm on his shoulder. So I'm probably about 2 and he's 16. This is him in front of his helicopter during the war. And then a little article about him being awarded a medal. He was in the Vietnam War, and the reason it's called Pennies from Vietnam is because when he went off to war, he promised to send me, his little 4-year-old sister, pennies for my piggy bank. And he sent them when he was in like boot camp and training. But then he spent some on cigarettes and he spent some on strip shows. Some of my pennies were lost. They kind of took on a life of their own for me. He wrote 99 letters that I have a copies of. He might have wrote some that were lost, but in the first 25 or so that are not in the book, those where I got the most of the pennies because he was in America. He was very naive to think he was going to find American pennies in the jungles of South Asia. Just shows you how naive they are at 18 years old. He did continue to look for them, but obviously I got like some coins from him, but they were Vietnamese coins. They really are more symbolic as a title than the pennies themselves because they represent the soldiers. And now even to this day, how pennies are just sort of dismissed. They're not valued. People don't pick them up on the ground. They cost us more to make than they do in values. I see the theme going all through the story relative to pennies.
I think anytime that whether you traditionally publish, whether you self-publish, the title of a novel is so important because it catches a person's eye, first of all, but secondly, it tells your story without someone actually even reading your story. And so to be able to say something as short as Pennies from Vietnam can mean so much and can say so much. Did you always know that that was going to be the title? Or did it come to you as you were writing?
So the title was a point of contention between me and the publisher. I had always named the book War and Pennies. And I thought that was a brilliant name because of War and Peace. The publisher won out because they wanted the name Vietnam in the main title, not in the subtitle. They sell to a lot of libraries globally. And that was just important for library indexing. My argument was, my gosh, but pennies didn't come from Vietnam. You know, I was just thinking so literally. I was like, they came from Alabama. And that pennies from Alabama is not the story. And this story really is not about pennies. It's thematic as we go on. I love their subtitle, though, A Sister at Home, a Brother at War, because that tells you what the book is about. You can tell that it's a sister and a brother relationship talking about the war.
I love that they brought in the pennies into the title, though. It's so symbolic because we think a penny for your thoughts. So it changes kind of from the physical pennies to the mental ones that he sends home to you. There is a lot that goes into launching a book. I know that you went on a tour and all kinds of things. So how much of the building of your platform, the getting your name out, the marketing and things of your book do you do versus the publisher?
I do 99% of it. I know that they do promote it to their people, and they have, I haven't got my first royalty check yet, so I'm not even sure how many we've sold, but it's coming in the next 24 days. So I'll let you know. I'm not sure that they do a ton. I know that they send it out for reviews. I know they send it to libraries or somehow promote it to libraries. And I mean, beyond that, it's not a lot that they do, honestly. And I think that's true for all publishers. Just they have a very slim margin. Now they've been wonderful to work with, and anything I've asked for, they've given me and explained to me how to do it or given me the tools I need. They've been very supportive, and they think the book's doing great because they said that. I have been hustling to do the book launch. You know, pre-book, I did the 25 videos, which is like a prequel to the book, which is those 25 letters. My son read every one of them. He was about 19 and Larry's about 19. I did those and put them on YouTube with pictures of the actual first 25 letters. And we did that on the date that he wrote them, starting in April and going till the end of June. I think it was a wonderful way to kind of lead up to the book. Or if somebody's read the book, they want to get some backstory. We had a book launch team. I didn't really know what to expect from a book launch team. I probably wasn't super clear on what they should do or I should do. I did have about 50 people. Sarah and her husband were both two of them. And they just kind of helped promote it on social media, talked it up to their friends. If they had any veteran groups or book clubs or whatever that they would invite me to, they read the art copy. Some of them gave me Amazon reviews on that. Sarah as well. The book tour was 100% me. Like, I spent way more money on this than I will make in the first year. Hopefully, over the years, I'll make a little bit here and there. If you're writing for money, get a second job. That's my advice. I did it for purpose, and I feel like the purpose has become even more clear in the process. I wasn't sure if it was going to be well received in the veteran community because it's very raw. And Larry says things that are offensive to some people because he's a teenage boy just being really truthful. He says things that are hard to read from a sister or mother perspective. Now that I've gotten some strangers and a lot of veterans to give me feedback, it's much like what Sarah's husband told me in the early beta read. My brother kind of speaks for the everyday soldier. A lot of 4-star generals and pilots, they have books, they have movies, but the guy on the ground, the simple soldier that's homesick, writing letters home, having these internal struggles, that's sort of who he speaks for. I just had my neighbor stop me the other day. I said, "How's your dad like my book?" Because he's a veteran. And she said, he's a man that doesn't talk at all about anything. And he will not stop talking about your book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he called me from Michigan. We talked for 50 minutes and he shared stories with me. And I told him how proud I was for him sharing those stories. And I said, I think there's a lot of healing in you telling these stories. Reading this book, it reminded him of the dirt. It reminded him some smells and some friends and some funny things that happened. He said something that really hit me. He said, "Yeah, well, the problem is nobody wants to hear it."
Yeah.
That's not true, but that's how he feels. You know, people, they need to hear these stories. The purpose, I think, is much wider than I ever could have imagined for military families and people to understand these stories really matter. And they are our boys and girls that we send off to fight. There's like 1% of our population is military in the United States, 1%. And 1% of that 1% ever see active combat. So we're talking about a very small number of heroes. Every single one of them have stories that we need to hear. And even the ones that didn't go in combat but still served, they can relate to things that we never, ever will see in our lives.
Our fighting forces today still have the same thing. And I love that your book gives them something to be able to say, read this, this is how it feels, and then come and talk to me. I know that you are in the communities, and that's part of your networking for this book. You're in the American Legion, the Gold Star Moms, the 1st Cavalry, the Red Cross. You network and build the base of people who are going to help you with getting your message out.
They were really the ones that started it. DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution, they have chapters all over. Everybody I asked in the DAR said, yes, come speak to us. And we can't wait for your book to be ready. That was 5 years ago. So I hope they know. I hope they got the message. But then the 1st Cav opened their doors to me. And when I got on their stage, it was in DC, it was Veterans Day. I had never been on such a big stage where, 5-star generals had only been, or, they never really had a civilian ever in all the years. So just being on that stage made me know it's not me. It's nothing magical that I've done. It's not even my writing because I didn't have a book at that time. All I had was Larry's letters. And so they stood on their own then. When I found his best friend, Rich Passer, who you'll read about in the book, he said, I've been looking for your brother for 48 years. And he didn't know that he had passed. It took him about a year to just process my brother's death. He was so saddened by it. But he said, Tracy, I'm going to tell you what happened to your brother in Vietnam. Do you know? And I said, no. I mean, other than what's in the letters. And he said something really bad happened. And then he couldn't talk about it. So the book went on the shelf, off the shelf, on the shelf, off the shelf. And finally, one day in the beginning of 2019, he said, I'm going to tell you everything. Write your book before I die. I want to read it. And there was one tragic incident. And I went on to find the pilot that was killed in that incident, his family, who gave me the blessing to share the story. Just last December, a year ago, in the middle of publication, I found the pilot that was piloting that helicopter. First, I got third-hand information about the accident. Then I got second-hand. Then I got first-hand. And so when I met that pilot and I got his story, I called the publisher. I was like, we've got to change the book. Like, this is really important stuff. It made me understand my brother's trauma a little bit. I mean, you can't understand it unless you're in that space and time. That could be a whole other book.
I think The biggest thing as writers is that we want people to connect with your novel. You want people to feel like they're not the only one that feels these things or do these things. You have people who use own voice and they write stories about stuff that happened in their lives. And when do you do that balance of, yes, I wasn't in Vietnam, and yes, I didn't experience these things, but I have done the research and I have gotten the permission and I have gotten all these things to be able to tell this story. And I think you have done it in such a beautiful way. Some parts of it is yours because it was how you experienced it and the stuff that you went through, but also it was parts of him. I think a lot of times own voices also just from one perspective, from one person's childhood and from one person's traumatic experiences. Whereas I think this one is such a mixture of it all, and you can see it from so many different sides, which is just amazing.
I attribute the best stories in this book to those men that I found, because Larry told it in the letters, but he left a lot of blanks. So that's why I went on the book tour, is to find several of those guys that helped me write this book, because without them, it wouldn't have been as rich as it is in story. I think it would have just been, well, this is what Larry wrote. I think this is what that means. I'm so glad to be done with this book. I'm going to do something really lighthearted next. I think I should write a whole other book about how I found these people, because some of it was another just lesson in research on the internet, how those rabbit holes could help.
I strongly believe, for memoir writers especially, there is a huge balance between writing everything that you want out versus the things people care to know versus the things you should let them know, because you have to keep that confidentiality with people. So how do you balance those three things?
Wow, that was just the grace of God that gave me all those answers, Sarah. I have no system or answer for that. I'm just going to say I took more out of this book than I put into it. There's 230 pages of it. I probably took out another 200 pages. You write and you write, and then you really have to hone in on what is important to this story. There's one element in the story where I just mention that I'm adopted. And I've had several people say to me, "Are you really adopted?" Or tell me a little bit more about that. I'm like, but that's not the story. I had a ton more stuff about my dad and my mom's relationship. I had a ton more stuff about me as a child. In the end, I was like, but that doesn't feed the main story. I had to really hone in on why I'm writing the book, who is reading it, do they care about me and my dad and my mom at this point. How much do they need to know about them? Really, they just need to know enough to make the letters make sense and the family dynamics to come together. And then the stuff that's really sensitive, I shared with the people that needed to approve it. Everything I wrote about Miss America, I sent to her, and she had a few changes. Same with the story he never told. I sent it to them just to make sure it was respectfully told. I stayed in touch with everybody along the way, and I made sure they were happy with the way it was written too.
It's people's real lives. It's people's real feelings. I feel like you have to be able to separate yourself from your story enough to think that logically about it. Is that right?
Yeah. I also had to look at myself as a character in the book, which is something I really didn't realize I had to do. You do have to kind of separate yourself into different places when you're writing in terms of point of view and perspective. Every third chapter I wrote was sort of a flash forward, and I wrote that in a very odd second person. I don't really know why I did it, but looking back on it, I'm told that it was sort of a response to my own trauma. So those chapters are about when he was in the hospital and he was dying, he was in a coma. That whole part of the story wasn't in the book initially. I really struggled whether to put it in. It was so hard for me to write and to reveal and to relive. But through that, I really did grieve his death 20 years later. And I processed it. And now I got through it, not over it, but through it by writing about it. So it was very therapeutic, but I was like, oh, do I have to make the world read this? The feedback I got was it tied to the story of what trauma does to our bodies and how it's generational trauma. It doesn't go away. And then also just to show how Larry suffered so much despite his amazing service and heroic actions to our country. But that is written in second person. So then it kind of separates me as a writer so I don't have to live it again. I put it off on you guys. But I had heard about doing that on some podcast somewhere, writers thing, probably on Pitch to Publish. And man, the minute I put it in second person, I was just writing like a fiend. I felt like some of the easiest writing I've done. I did very little edits to those chapters because I didn't want to relive it.
I do have the utmost respect for people who write memoirs because, I mean, I don't even want to sit by myself at night and think about my life. You start with the first draft. You have to go through your memoir or your autobiography like numerous times. Either you have to be in a certain point in your life where you're just like, I need to share this. Or you really need to have a personality where you're just like, yeah, just throw it all out. Let people see all the ugly in a beautiful way. Please don't anyone ever ask me to write a memoir because I can't even remember what I ate yesterday. Never mind what happened 20 months ago.
It really helped that I had 2 older sisters. One has since passed, but that really helped me because I was able to call them both separately and say, hey, what do you remember about Larry having a pet? I called them each separately and they both told me the story and it meshed. And then I also, like, back to your original question, I sat down with each of them and I read how I described them. You know, because one was sort of like Cinderella and one was sort of like the princess. I wrote it and I read it both to them and I said, do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you feel offended? And they're both like, nope, you nailed it. They both gave me permission to sort of expose how they were as children and then the memory of a lot of things that helped.
For a memoir writer to have people who like what you're writing, for them to be like, make this peak, we're good. I know some of our memoir writers out there don't have that they're writing something so deeply hurtful to them and the people around them that they don't have that kind of support. Have you ever come across that situation where somebody just says, I don't want to be in that book, I don't want any of this in there? And how do you handle that?
I didn't really hear it for Penny's book. I have heard it with the book that I'm writing next because that has a lot of different characters and some of them are still alive. Most of the ones in this book are gone. It's a whole different dynamic when they're alive and well and you want to say something bad about their mama or their kid or them. I actually am struggling with that a little bit right now. Just in doing the outline of this, I think I might write it as a fiction based on a true story. And I don't know enough about fiction market to say whether that makes sense or not. I probably can't get the same publisher. They only do nonfiction. So I'm not really sure that I want to go through the painstaking effort of finding a agent.
Unless you do isn't there narrative nonfiction?
Yeah, and maybe just change the names.
Maybe, yeah.
I've thought of that too. This next story is so unbelievable. If I tell you it's a true story, people are going to say she's lying. I might have to prove that I have a crazy family and put it as a true story.
Listen, people believe we live in huts in South Africa. So then I'm just like, we don't, but thank you for thinking that.
Let them think it, right? Haters gonna hate.
I think some people don't realize that you may find an agent, but if you decide to branch into something else, does that agent represent that? Does that publisher publish that? Yeah. Every manuscript is really its own beast that you have to take separately.
Yeah, and my agent didn't come to me first. Mine was a very crooked road. Although she's been very supportive, I already had the deal and I took it to her and said, will you agent me? And of course she's going to say yes. I already have a publisher, so she didn't really have to do much. She does know people in the film industry. She helped me to get film rights, which is huge. She had already done it once. So I was like, I'm going to pick her because she's done that and that's what I need her for. And she got that done for me. So I'm very excited to do the next book, but I don't think she would agent it for me. I might go self-publish the second one too. Like, who knows?
Why not? If not, why not? Life's a journey, Tracy, honestly.
Exactly. I will tell you in the preface of the book, there's one quote by Maya Angelou that sort of sums up why I think we do what we do as writers. She said there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. And whether that's a true story or a fiction story, it's inside you. You got to get those stories out, or it's agonizing. They're in your head doing all this stuff, and you got to like get it on paper. Is it like that for you?
They keep me up at night too.
Till 1 a.m, apparently, when people should be sleeping, but okay.
I've had a story once. I started writing at 9 p.m. and next time I looked up, it was 5 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
Sometimes they just take over, don't they?
Sometimes, all the time. What do you mean, Sarah? Your character's not too nice to you. Because mine are driving me crazy.
Oh, okay. So, Tracy, I just want to end with one last question. What would you suggest that someone who's writing memoirs, what would make it both fulfilling for them to write and make that memoir something they feel like they can put out?
There's a lot of emotional things that you have to deal with in memoir writing. And so the first thing I said was to write for yourself. Tracy Crow said, write the book you want to write. And I was like, it just freed me. It freed me from thinking I had to do this book a certain way, or that there was some rule. This is my book. I can write whatever I want to write. If it sells, it sells. If it helps, it helps. If it doesn't, oh well, I'm done. Write what's in you. Write what keeps you up at till 5 a.m. No holds barred, write it like it's a journal. Or a dream, or nobody will ever read it. You can edit for the rest of your life, but get it out there first. I had an editor one time say you should write drunk and edit sober. Thought that was great advice. Once you're kind of through your writing and your editing, to make each scene come alive, I try to think of who, what, when, where, how, and why, and then smells, tastes, thoughts, prayers. Like, you can say it was a hot day, but how hot was it? In Vietnam, it was so hot that so many veterans have told me different ways to express hot that I should have put probably better description in the book. But yeah, honing in on the scene itself after you write it with, abandon. My brother was Army. I am an ambassador now for Military Writers Society of America, and we give free presentations to veterans and their families about writing their own stories in an attempt to get them
fantastic.
Right.
So if you'd like to see more of what Tracy is doing and more about her books, you can go to her website at www.tracysmithmathis.com or find her on Facebook at Tracy Smith Mathis Author. And both of those links will be in the description notes. And Tracy, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story and your book and your advice.
Thank you so much, you guys. This has been fabulous. I appreciate you so much.
We like to keep it short here on Tea and Tales. Get your fingers back on the keyboard and your pens back on the paper.
And if you love what we're doing here, go follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Threads at Tea and Tales Podcast. And on TikTok and Twitter/X at Podcast Tea Tales. And go to that purple icon on your device and give us 5 stars so we can go up, 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 up to the top.
Happy writing.
Bye.
Bye.